Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of If You're Not Convinced. And today I'm going to try and convince you to play a game called Gravity Rush 2. Gravity Rush 2 is a game with fun gameplay, incredible visuals, and a lackluster story that I've absolutely fallen in love with. For those of you who are fans of the series, I just want to say that I'm not going to be talking about the first Gravity Rush, as I didn't play it when it first came out on the PS Vita, and the remastered version is more expensive than the sequel because... Canada, I guess. Gravity Rush 2 stars a cute and powerful cat who has a cute and powerful cat that allows her to manipulate gravity. With these powers, she is tasked with not only saving the world, but everything else too, from delivering newspapers to chasing down birds. Generally speaking, my goal with this video is to just try and convince you to play this game, as I really think it is underrated. With that being said, I'd like to try and split this video into 3 parts: gameplay, presentation, and story. So without further ado, let's begin with... Gameplay in Gravity Rush 2 consists of 3 things: travel, combat, and civilian abuse. All of these things are done using Cat's pet Dusty, who is a godlike cat that allows Cat to shift gravity. So she's not necessarily flying, but more changing her gravitational direction, causing her to fall wherever you choose. The shifting gravity also plays a role in combat, which consists of using different gravity styles to launch not only herself into enemies, but objects around her using her stasis abilities. Combat has been regarded by some as being repetitive and boring, though I find that there are enough mix-ups in the core mechanics that make it fresh. As the game goes on, you acquire 2 new gravity styles too that affect the way you move and attack. The first style you unlock is the lunar style, which makes you much lighter, and because of this you walk as though you weigh nothing and you're given even more control in the air as to where you're going, although with the sacrifice of speed. You can even clear buildings in a single jump. Your attacks become faster but less damaging, and you even swap out your typical gravity kick for a teleport kick. Other things like your stasis abilities are altered so that if you were to throw an object at an enemy in your normal style, it would just hit him. In the lunar style, it'll stun the enemy too. The next style you get much later is the Jupiter style. This style is essentially the opposite of the lunar style, as you are instead increasing your weight, and in turn your attacks are slower but more powerful, and you fall much faster with the sacrifice of control. Your gravity kick is now an incredible drop to the ground that causes an explosion upon impact, and your stasis now takes the multiple objects typically grabbed and forms a singular massive ball that devastates upon impact. Finally, your super moves are affected by the change in styles. Typically, your super move is a spiral claw attack that hones in on enemies and does great damage. But in the lunar style, the super move is a barrage of projectiles that's great for when you're focusing on a singular opponent or weak point. Meanwhile, the Jupiter super move is a micro black hole that decimates everything around you, making this a great move for crowd control. There aren't too many situations where you're forced to use a singular gravity style, but it's nice to have the different options, and once mastered, combat is a beautiful symphony of attacks while switching from gravity kicks to teleport attacks and micro black holes. When it comes to combat, what you see is often what you get. You'll be using the same handful of attacks to deal with the same handful of enemies, and that goes for most of the bosses too. So if it looks interesting from what you see, chances are you're going to like it as much as I did. When it comes to the gameplay of Gravity Rush 2, satisfaction is often the first thing that comes to mind. The way Cat's hair and clothes aggressively flip and whip around as she's falling through the sky at breakneck speeds never gets old. The way that when you start shifting gravity around NPCs, they get affected too and they'll fly with you is always fun. And there's some sadistic fun to be had with just destroying the town as you see fit, from destroying markets to throwing people off of cliffs. Combat is also satisfying when you get the hang of it, and the way in which you flow from one enemy to the other with powerful gravity kicks never got old for me. Things like picking up an enemy through stasis and then throwing him into another enemy is one of the many ways the game can make you feel unstoppable. By far, the most satisfying thing about the gameplay of Gravity Rush 2 is the natural progression. You're always getting stronger, not only through actual increases in damage value, but also through your own eventual grasp and mastery of all of Cat's abilities. At the beginning of the game, she floats around, often spinning and flailing while falling, and as a player, you're not very good at combat in the beginning. Though as the game progresses, you become much more familiar with the controls, and combat becomes a breeze, and eventually you'll be flying through the air with perfect form. You upgrade these abilities of yours by collecting what the game calls precious gems. These things are everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. Caves, fields, buildings, sides of buildings, underneath buildings, on top of buildings, there, up, down, every right, fucking... You get the point. Collecting these gems is essential to being able to upgrade Cat's abilities, and if you were like me and didn't bother grabbing them out of laziness, then you won't have very many upgrades at all, even by the end game. This can lead to some later stages being a little difficult, but I didn't notice too much trouble. You do also level up your health and gravity endurance through the completion of main and side quests. Unfortunately, the side content in this game, while not too cookie cutter, can be quite dull most of the time. Most missions can be boiled down to go here, fight basic enemies, escort NPC to a location, win. Fortunately, the core mechanics and the gameplay were entertaining enough for me to not get bored. So while gameplay in my opinion is great, it wouldn't be as good as it is if the presentation wasn't also spot on. Speaking of which, so this game is absolutely stunning, from the cel-shaded graphics to the character models and even the little duckies walking around town. Speaking of which, the city's main hub and where most of the missions will be taking place is beautiful too. All the buildings have wonderful detail and the main hub feels greatly populated with people walking around, merchants selling food, and birds flying through the sky. The lighting in most cases is great too. Story segments are presented in these comic-like character panels with key story segments being shown through cutscenes. Don't bother listening to the dialogue as everything is spoken in a made-up mishmash of languages. The audio is solid where it needs to be and the sound of the wind ripping past Cat as she flies through the air never gets old. One area where the game blows it out of the water is the soundtrack. Every song is great, from the fun relaxing hub theme to the absolute headbangers that they use for the boss battles. I also found all the environments to be pretty fun to explore. The animations in the game are fantastic as well. The way Cat's body, hair, and clothes react to the wind and environment around her feels very real, on top of everything looking smooth thanks to the game running at a consistent 30 frames per second. Back to the animation. It's not just Cat that moves with grace, but the environment too. Enemies and objects caught in stasis are thrown violently, boxes shatter into a million pieces, and enemies just get thrown from Cat's array of melee attacks. Speaking of melee attacks, it's cool to see the way that Cat attacks with more speed during the Lunar style, and with so much force in the Jupiter style, it looks like she's just throwing her weight around rather than actually punching. Now that we've finished with gameplay and presentation, it's finally time to get into the story. And I just want to make something clear. If you have enjoyed what you've seen so far, chances are you're going to like this game, and I suggest you go pick it up because I think you're going to love it as much as I did. Now, with that being said, it's time to get into the worst part of the game, but also my favorite part of the game, which is the story. And I'll say it right now, the story objectively sucks. Now, don't get me wrong. I love it. It's just terrible, and your suspension of disbelief has to be through the roof to get the most enjoyment out of this, because the story is essentially anime bullshit. Now, I will be spoiling everything in the story, so if you're convinced to play this game, say, halfway through this next section, then do me a favor, just stop the video, go play it, and then come back. And with that being said, let's get into the story. Gravity Rush 2 begins with you as a miner dropping into a mining site through a first-person perspective. After walking around, you meet up with another miner in order to collect material. After a gravity storm hits, we see our main characters Cat and her friend Sid begin to take advantage of the leader's orders for everyone to evacuate by grabbing more minerals for themselves, though they are drawn into a corner, being barely rescued by the leader of the miners, Lisa. The first chapter, titled Bangus Settlement, begins with Cat doing odd jobs for people around the settlement. These little odd jobs give you an idea of what each character is about. Sid is a charming yet lazy friend that will do whatever it takes to get out of work. Cece is a reserved adopted daughter of Lisa, who much like Cat and Sid seem to have appeared out of nowhere. She also carries around this doll that supposedly came down with her, which I found weird considering she's listed as 15 on the wiki. Lisa's the stern leader of the settlement, and as you play, you find out more about Cat's origins. We find that herself, Sid, and her friend named Raven were sucked into a strange gravity vortex, with Cat and Sid being taken in by this mining settlement, and Raven being essentially MIA. Now you may notice something as you start playing. There's no actual gravity shifting. Through dialogue, you find out that Cat's source of power named Dusty has abandoned her, and therefore she can no longer shift gravity. Other people around the settlement are extremely skeptical of Cat's tales, as there is no proof, but for now we just have to keep trucking along. Thankfully, just before you get tired of running around the Bangus settlement, you and Sid are tasked with looking for Cece, who has recently gone missing. After adventuring through a mountain, you encounter the game's regular enemies. Sadly, with no gravity powers, you're forced to run, and eventually, after finding Cece, this happens. Honestly, this will be one of the few times that the story does something incredibly dumb. Like, I can't make this up. Basically, Cat's like, oh geez, I really wish Dusty was here. And then Dusty just walks in from the side of the frame. So, I mean, like, I don't even know how he got there. Nothing's explained about it, and just whatever, man. Just keep going. It's not a big deal. Anyways, Cat and Dusty are reunited and immediately begin defending their friends. Once this happens, you are thrust into a quick time event, and upon completion are shown what finishers are. Finishers are a special type of attack that Cat can perform once a boss's health bar has been nearly drained. While the first time seeing this is mind-blowing, the animation is nearly the same for every boss with very minor tweaks. Anywho, upon defeating this monster, you finish the first of 20 chapters within the game. Yeah, this is going to be a long one. Most of the episodes within the first chapter involve busy work along with Cat and the gang trying to prevent their seller, Vogo's son, from shortchanging them through competition. Eventually, after beating Vogo through competition against his brother and partner Fee, The floating tribe heads to the city of Jirga for supplies. Once you get to the city of Jirga you begin Chapter 2 of the game, titled Jirga. Upon the beginning of Chapter 2, you are introduced to the game's hub world. This city consists of 4 districts, being not only divided by elevation, but by class. The bottom of the city is the slums, with the top of the city being the city's militarist high council that oppresses the middle and lower class. You begin by meeting up with Vogo and finding out that a portion of his shipment has been stolen by a gang known as the Angry Centipedes. After asking around the island, we find that these thieves are located in a base within the slums of the city. After arriving and confronting the thieves, you find out that the Angry Centipede gang is forced to steal in order to feed the people in the slums. After realizing her mistake, Kat is interrupted by soldiers coming in and being ordered to kill the citizens in the slums. My god, even the women and children! Yeah, whatever. Kat goes in and proceeds to wipe the floor with these guys, and then goes on to give the ore that Kat received from her work with Vogo to the people in the slums. With this, she's officially on good terms with them. Kat strengthens this bond by giving fuel to the Angry Centipede gang instead of giving it to a rich woman as she was supposed to. Kat then finds out that the military plans to clear out an entire island with plans to build an amusement park of all things. After finding out, Kat tries to get help from Lisa in the settlement, though Lisa refuses. Regardless, Kat takes care of it, and as she's defending the island, the soldiers start talking about something called the Nightingale. After the reveal, we find out that this is Kat's friend Raven, though she doesn't seem very friendly. After tracking her down, you engage in your first official boss fight. The fight really isn't much at all, and once you execute a finishing move on Raven, she snaps out of her brainwashed state and helps Kat defeat the rest of the soldiers. Raven is a shifter, much like Kat, though instead of having a cat allowing her to manipulate gravity, it's a raven named Z. Kat has a cat, Raven has a raven. Real original, guys. After a failed invasion on the city's military gunship called the Bismalia, everyone from the settlement is taken prisoner, aside from Kat and Raven. The High Council offers them a deal. Go on a rescue mission for them and they'll release their settlement friends. While going on this rescue mission, you find a strange item on a podium. Upon interacting with the item, you gain your new lunar gravity style. The next portion of this area is essentially a tutorial for your new powers that I've already gone over in the gameplay section. Upon completing this, you reach a city that Kat, Sid, and Raven were in when the gravity storm hit at the beginning of the game. After searching for a crashed ship and taking down a ton of enemies, a mysterious rift opens, and with the area closing around you, you make a break for this rift and end up back in the main hub where you find that only Lisa and a few others have been released. You then stage a full-fledged breakout and attack on the Bismalia, saving CC and Sid in the meantime. This leads to Lisa starting an uprising against the government, but fortunately, and rather conveniently, the city from the mining site from before had appeared through a gravity storm directly on top of the council's building. This city seems to be possessed by some creature. Is it getting weird yet? Anyways, you save the people by disconnecting the islands and blowing up the bridges connecting them, and kick some ass on the city monster thing. And it turns out that Cece was taken by the monster, and upon hearing this, Kat and Raven travel inside the monster to get her, and after blowing through countless enemies, Kat obtains the Jupiter gravity style. The next area, much like before, is a tutorial area for her new powers, and again, I already touched on this in the gameplay section. As they move through, Kat and Raven come to the heart of this monster, with CC being used as sort of a power source. After laying the beat down on this machine and doing a beautiful finisher, the two take down the city and save CC along with everyone else. Once CC is saved, she seems delusional and claims she's not CC, but before any questions can be answered, the three are pulled into a rift that the city came through. We then see that Kat is in a dimension outside of the laws of space and time, and there she is met by these two people that are supposedly these all-powerful creators. They basically say, yeah, you'll be fine, and Kat wakes up on the ground in her old hometown, Hexville. Kat wakes up in her old town of Hexville, and according to her, things are different than when she was last here. We find out that buildings have been moved, new leaders are coming to power, and despite her being the hero of the town during the first game, Hexville now has a new hero. Kat also notices that her home that consists of an old sewer pipe and a bed is not officially registered within the new electronic citizenship system, and proceeds to find a new home amongst the slums. She eventually meets and befriends a man named Dr. Brahman, who speaks about his daughter who has been in a type of coma. Kat eventually realizes that this nice man is in fact a politician running for mayor, and due to his wealthiness, he gives Kat the sewer pipe home makeover. Kat is then approached by a police officer named Chaz, who needs her help finding robots around town that have been rigged to blow. Upon thwarting a terrorist attack on Hexville, Kat finally encounters the new protector of the town, and daughter of Brahman, Callie Angel. So Callie, while not a gravity shifter, does have some enhanced powers and abilities. Her and Kat defeat the forces, though it seems Callie isn't too fond of Kat. While looking for a package for the Mayor Brahman, Kat encounters some rebels within Hexville, though their intentions aren't made very clear at this point. The rebels take the package, and upon taking them down, you see that the package is some strange-looking crystal. Callie quickly scoops the crystal up and takes off, leaving Kat with the rebels surrounding her. Eventually, two head rebels show up, and upon defeating them, they are revealed to be Permit and Unica, who are not brought up until now, so I assume they're from the first game? These two explain that Brahmin is not what he seems, and that he is in fact very dangerous. After Callie returns, forcing the two rebels to retreat, Kat and her return to Brahmin's blimp, where Brahmin finally explains to Kat his plan. He explains that he had a daughter with a rare deadly disease, and upon experimenting and searching for a way to slow down the disease, he slowed down time for her. He says that even a second for her is 1,000 years for everyone else, and so he plans to freeze everyone and everything in Hexville in order to remove the barrier between them. He needs two powerful beings for this plan to come to fruition, which is why he needs Kat to complete his plan. Unfortunately for him, Kat doesn't think it's a very good idea, and when Brahmin gets more aggressive, Kat jumps out and leaves. Once she gets back to the ground, she sees an emergency broadcast sent out by Brahmin, claiming Kat to be a criminal, and in turn nearly the entire city is on the hunt for her. Kat's first idea is to go home, but a mysterious boy is waiting there for her, and tells her that it isn't safe to be there. She proceeds to run and hide more until eventually being cornered by Callie and her army of robots. Thankfully, Chaz proceeds to show everyone his evidence of Brahmin's crimes right in the nick of time, and with that, everyone turns on not only Brahmin, but Callie too, forcing Callie to fight Kat. Callie hits like a semi and beats the shit out of Kat, until Raven and Cece show up out of nowhere and team up to take Callie down. Kat and Cece eventually explain that they were sent through a rift by a man with a strange robotic voice who is mentioned quite frequently by characters. We are shown that Cece is compatible for something that Brahmin is planning, and it seems as though they are familiar with her. We are told then that both Brahmin and Callie seem to have vanished for weeks. Now, I just want to warn you, it gets worse. So after a while, the robots around town seem to be on the fritz, and it seems to be on the attack too. After taking down a few, Callie shows up and you engage in another confrontation with her. Upon defeating her, Cece appears seeming to be in some sort of trance-like state, and upon Kat calling her name, she responds as if she doesn't know who she is. As the robots approach her, she releases an outward explosion of crystals and runs off. After chasing her down and having another battle with Callie, Cece, upon touching Callie's hand, turns into Durga Angel. Also, fun fact, Cece's appearance here looks just like the doll she held onto back in the settlement. Anyways, after failing to defeat Callie and Durga, even with the help of Raven, both Kat and Raven are defeated, and upon being rescued by some rebels are taken to what seems to be a different dimension. Within this dimension, both Kat and Raven are forced to defeat a shadow version of themselves in order to harness the power of what the game calls Panther Mode. In this mode, Kat will not only take less damage, but heal gradually as she's in this mode. Her attacks are also powered up to extreme measures, though this mode can only be activated during key story segments. Upon reawakening, Kat and Raven see Callie and Durga commencing their master plan of stopping time, and Kat and Raven along with the rebels head off to stop them. After thwarting their plans, Callie and Durga begin to go on the attack, and because of Durga's incredible power, the rebels shift their focus to taking her down. Due to Kat's knowledge of Durga's true self being Cece, she demands them to stop, and when they ignore those demands, Kat begins attacking the rebels. After defeating the rebels, Callie and Durga are given a chance to create a barrier around the city. But when Lisa and your friends from the Banga settlement show up due to a mysterious person telling them where to go, Lisa begins to call Cece's name, and Durga seems to sort of snap out of it for a moment. And in that time, Kat and Raven beat down on Callie enough for them to launch a finishing blow. As they approach, Durga steps in and sacrifices herself. Callie, in distraught as a last-ditch effort, goes...
What? Okay, look, I've been really trying to, like, keep it cool this entire video and ignore this anime bullshit, but, like, what the fuck is that? Honestly.
I'm okay. Okay? I'm alright. So while this makes no sense, it is a decently cool boss fight and a neat set piece, so there isn't really much to this. You just kick her eyes and she goes down like a piece of cake, and then it ends. Kat and Raven execute a killing blow on the monstrous Callie, and just like that, the game ends. During the credits, Brahmin is shown to have been impaled and eventually bleeds out. Kat and Lisa have a conversation about how Lisa found her way to Hexville, and she explains that a man named Alias came to her and explained that Kat was the quote-unquote key to something, and that the monstrous Callie was a sign of the end of the world. The last thing we're shown is a glowing figure standing ominously over Hexville.
Honestly, I think this ending sucks. It leaves more questions than answers, and it just sort of ends abruptly, and it seems like it's sequel baiting, and I'm just sort of left wanting more. Welcome to the final chapter of the game, Ito.
Initially, this final chapter seems just like the title of the endgame because there's no story missions available. There is this glowing figure that appears in front of you upon loading the game, and if you track her down and talk to her, you'll notice that she doesn't speak English, but instead makes these weird moaning sounds. Despite this, Kat can still understand her, and this shining figure communicates that she is imprisoned, and in fact projecting her soul to Kat, and speaking to her will initiate another story mission titled, The End of the World. A cutscene plays where the shining girl lifts Kat into the air, and we're shown a dark void underneath Hexville consuming the city. Then a strange man appears, demanding that Kat ascends the World Pillar. The World Pillar is bang in the center of Hexville, and it's really neat because it has a sort of ominous feel to it. For example, throughout the entire game there's always music playing, and rightfully so because the music is top notch. But when you get close to the World Pillar, the music is gone and you're just left in silence, and it's super mysterious and eerie.
In the world of Gravity Rush, time is based on elevation.
For example, the lower down you are on the World Pillar, the slower time moves, and the higher you are, the faster it moves. Anywho, you're tasked with ascending the World Pillar in order to find the answers to what Kat's key role is in preventing the end of the world. Upon ascending, you enter the snow-ridden, foggy city that is sprawling with interconnected towers and castles. You even see some of the basic enemies floating around here, but they're not only non-hostile, but they're also white. Possibly due to the snow and climate? Who knows? You make your way up here, and eventually once you reach the top of the city, both Kat and Raven are knocked out. Kat then awakens in a bedroom and is wearing a very fancy and royal outfit while being referred to as Queen Alua. Upon waking up, she is tasked with heading to a large room where she must hear the issues of the people.
During this entire section, Kat doesn't really seem to question anything she's being told, and it seems like she doesn't remember anything before coming up to Ito. And I swear to God, if this is some, ooh, it was all a dream bullshit, I'm gonna throw my PS4 out the window.
One of the recurring things that you'll see is there's a room directly across from you that you are prohibited from entering. Much like the player in this case, Kat is racking her brain about what's going on in there. For now though, we continue the same routine, being woken up by our servant and dealing with the Queen's responsibilities, and for some reason everyone is referring to you as Queen Alua. During these conversations, a lot is explained, including why Kat has Dusty, and as it turns out, these space-like beings are guardians, and they are only guardians for the royal bloodline. Kat is convinced by the people that she doesn't have one. Kat doesn't seem to question this, and by now I'm even more confused than ever, because she certainly has one. After a few more days pass, instead of being woken up by your servant, you're woken up by the voice of Alias, and it scared the shit out of me the first time I heard it. You wake up seemingly in the middle of the night and finally bust through the door that's been guarded this entire time, as the guards seem to be MIA. After descending a large winding staircase, you come across Raven, Z, and Dusty, and upon seeing this, Kat seems to snap and immediately take off her royal gown and stripping back down to her street clothes. This seems to snap her out of what seems to have been some sort of brainwashing, possibly happening from the gap between when she got knocked out and when she woke up, but eventually you head back to the main hall, and now with your gravity powers you are able to eavesdrop on Cicero and Alias. You find out from the conversation that Cicero betrayed you 100 years ago, though we don't know how. What we do know is that he's guilty about it, and the new ruler, King Sai, is running the kingdom into the ground. As it turns out, King Sai had overheard them talking, and King Sai's guardian Walt then kills Alias and Cicero. At this point, Kat drops down and tries to stop Sai and is thrust into a fight against the most amount of enemies you'll ever fight at once. After defeating them, Sai flees, and Kat runs to Cicero, who has a dying wish, asks a creator named Bit to show Kat the way. At this point, the mysterious child that saved you from the police earlier shows up and transports you to a place called the Brink. It is explained to Kat that this is necessary for her to understand who she is. Meanwhile, King Sai is shown releasing the mysterious shining figure from her imprisonment. During this interaction, we find out that this shining figure is electricity, and according to Sai, is all-powerful. The creator Bit wakes Raven and seems to imply that Kat and Raven are the same person that has been split, but the reason for this never seems to be answered. He also shows Raven a vision of what is happening, and we see that electricity is destroying Hexville, and we notice that no one refers to her lightning bolts as lightning. Lisa refers to it as the fire of the gods. This could mean that electricity is the personification of electricity.
Electricity is electricity.
Raven now knows that she needs to buy Kat time, as according to Alias, she will be the one to prevent the end of the world. Back to Kat, we see Sid, who was presumed dead by this point, who appears in thin air and tells Kat that she has to relive memories in order to understand who she is. Through completing some really cool puzzles, we see that 100 years ago when Kat was Queen Alua, she was panned by her peers for not having a guardian at the time and for worrying too much about the towns that were further down the world pillar. She wants to evacuate the city of Hexville to Ito so that when the black hole begins to consume the town like we saw earlier, no one would get hurt. We see that Cicero eventually threw Kat off of a cliff, and when Sid came to try and stop him, he was stabbed. When Kat fell, that was the first time Dusty had appeared, and when she got to the ground, she forgot who she was, and that essentially is where the story began. At this point, the creators tell Kat to head back to Hexville to try and stop Sai and electricity. We're then shown Raven has arrived, and seeing the entire town's forces failing to stop electricity at this point, it's up to her to buy some time. Raven and the rebels do everything they can to take down electricity, But even with such effort, they're no match, and a barrage of lightning attacks take out both Permit and Unica along with countless rebels. At this point, Raven hears a voice from inside that sounds like Cat, and this sends her into maximum overdrive. At this point in the game, one of the coolest things happens, and I'm not even going to tell you about it, I'm just going to show you. Just watch it. Sadly, it's not enough, and at this point, Kat arrives. She sees the city destroyed, her friends on the brink of death, and even Sai taunts her, saying she's too late. And at this point, she gets fucking pissed! Now, the reason why this is so awesome is because Kat, throughout the entire game, has been so relaxed and happy the entire time. People dying? That's okay. People getting screwed over? Yeah, well, it could be worse. But now, she almost goes feral. Like, watch this! She's screaming like crazy and acting like an animal in a fit of rage, and I think it's so cool. After more fighting, you eventually take down electricity for good, and at this point, Sai is enraged. And after getting absolutely bitch-slapped by Kat, Sai, as a last-ditch effort, fuses himself with the darkness below, creating a destructive force the size of a skyscraper. At this point, we cut to the creators looking down upon this, and they send out a last-ditch effort that looks like Alias being resurrected. We then cut back to Kat, and she's getting the beatdown from this destructive force. As Kat destroys the beast's weak points, it regenerates. She can't take them all out before some start to grow back, and at this point, Lisa shows up with an army from the Banga settlement who helps you in taking out the weak points. After taking out all the weak points, a final weak point appears, but Kat gets beaten down so hard that her powers start to drain, eventually losing the ability to use her stasis abilities and different gravity styles. Then Cece shows up, having mastered her new powers, and freezes the monster for you to get the final blow in. This isn't enough to stop the destructive force, and eventually the force breaks free and slams Cece into the ground. It starts to beat down on Kat even more, to the point where she can't even shift gravity. Kat is beaten up to the point of near death, and the darkness communicates with her, telling her that if she gives up now, she'll reawaken in a new timeline. A timeless world where she won't remember anything and she'll live happily ever after. But before she dies, Sid shows up and sends a ton of enemies at the Force, and due to this scene, I think it's revealed that Sid was Alias the whole time, I think? I don't know. The people of the town start to call out to Kat, and honestly, I'm not sure how, but this gives her enough power to absorb not only Dusty, but Z as well, and she basically goes Super Saiyan and tears the ass out of the destructive force. At which point, she has a final farewell with Sid. Now the world is safe. She has to leave, and it's revealed that Bit told her that in order to seal the darkness, Kat must sacrifice herself and become a singularity. Kat's adventure is now over. Now, I understand I skipped over a lot, but I wanted to make this video like 15 minutes max, and look where we are. So pardon me if I didn't talk about your favorite part. I just wanted to try and hit the key points. It was filled with random twists and a lot of quote-unquote anime bullshit, and I won't dispute that. But I don't know why. There's some sort of charm to it. Look, if you've made it this far into the video and you're still not convinced, then I don't know, man. Chances are it just might not be for you. Again, I'm no professional, okay? I'm just telling you why I like this game, and please, do not take my opinion as fact. Overall, I think Gravity Rush 2 was an awesome time, and I had fun throughout my entire 70 hours playing the game top to bottom, and I truly believe that this game is greater than the sum of its parts. Well, that's all I gotta say for now about this game. So if any of you are still here, I implore you to leave a like on the video and leave a comment telling me why you agreed or disagree with me. I also stream regularly on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatboyaqua. And if you're not sure if you'd like it, then you can use some of my stream highlights as a taste tester. There will be links to all that in the description, and if you found this video enjoyable, you can also check out my video I made on Bloodborne. Alright, That's all I got for now. If you made it this far, I sincerely appreciate you, and I will see you guys next time, which may or may not be a video on Pokemon. Okay, bye.